Chapter 20 in the Old John House. When The Woman Who Spanked the King was accepted and published by a New York magazine of some standing, quite a sensation was produced in Blairwater and Shrewsbury, especially when the incredible news was whispered from lip to lip that Emily had actually been paid $40 for it. For the first time, her clan began to take her writing mania with some degree of seriousness, and Aunt Ruth gave up, finally and forever, all slurs over wasted time. The acceptance came at the psychological moment when the sands of Emily's faith were running rather low. All the fall and winter, her stuff had been coming back to her, except from 2 magazines whose editors evidently thought that literature was its own reward and quite independent of degrading monetary considerations. At first, she had always felt dreadfully when a poem or story over which she had agonized came back with one of those icy little rejection slips or a few words of faint praise. The "but" rejections, Emily called these, and hated them worse than the printed ones. Tears of disappointment would come. But after a time, she got hardened to it, and didn't mind so much. She only gave the editorial slip the Murray look, and said, "I will succeed." And never at any time had she any real doubt that she would. Deep, deep down, something told her that her time would come. So, though she flinched momentarily at each rejection, as from the flick of a whip, she sat down and wrote another story. Still, her inner voice had grown rather faint under so many discouragements. The acceptance of The Woman Who Spanked the King suddenly raised it into a joyous paean of certainty again. The check meant much, but the storming of that magazine much more. She felt that she was surely winning a foothold. Mr. Carpenter chuckled over it and told her it really was absolutely good. "The best in this story belongs to Mistress McIntyre," said Emily ruefully. "I can't call it mine." "The setting is yours, and what you've added harmonizes perfectly with your foundation. And you didn't polish hers up too much. That shows the artist. Weren't you tempted to?" "Yes, there were so many places I thought I could improve it a good deal." "But you didn't try to. That makes it yours," said Mr. Carpenter, and left her to puzzle his meaning out for herself. Emily spent 35 of her dollars so sensibly that even Aunt Ruth herself couldn't find fault with her budget. But with the remaining 5, she bought a set of Parkmen. It was a much nicer set than the prize one, which the donor had really picked out of a mail order list. And Emily felt much prouder of it than if it had been the prize. After all, it was better to earn things for yourself. Emily has those Parkmans yet, somewhat faded and frayed now, but dearer to her than all the other volumes in her library. For a few weeks she was very happy and uplifted. The Murrays were proud of her. Principal Hardy had congratulated her. A local elocutionist of some repute had read her story at a concert in Charlottetown. And, most wonderful of all, a faraway reader in Mexico had written her a letter telling her what pleasure The Woman Who Spanked the King had given him. Emily read and reread that letter until she knew it off by heart, and slept with it under her pillow. No lover's missive was ever more tenderly treated. Then, the affair of the Old John House came up like a thundercloud, and darkened all her cerulean sky. There was a concert and pie social at Dairy Pond one Friday night, and Ilsa had been asked to recite. Dr. Burnley took Ilsa and Emily and Perry and Teddy over in his big double-seated sleigh, and they had a gay and merry 8 miles drive through the soft snow that was beginning to fall. When the concert was half over, Dr. Burnley was summoned out. There was a sudden and serious illness in a Dairy Pond household. The doctor went, telling Teddy that he must drive the party home. Dr. Burnley made no bones about it. They might have silly rules about chaperonage in Shrewsbury and Charlottetown, but in Blairwater and Dairy Pond they did not obtain. Teddy and Perry were decent boys. Emily was a Murray. Ilsa was no fool. The doctor would have summed them up thus tersely if he had thought about it at all. When the concert was over, they left for home. It was snowing very thickly now, and the wind was rising rapidly. But the first 3 miles of the road were through sheltering woods and were not unpleasant. There was a wild, weird beauty in the snow-coated ranks of trees, standing in the pale light of the moon behind the storm clouds. The sleigh bells laughed at the shriek of the wind far overhead. Teddy managed the doctor's team without difficulty. Once or twice, Emily had a strong suspicion that he was using only one arm to drive them. She wondered if he had noticed that evening that she wore her hair really up for the first time, in a soft ebon Psyche knot under her crimson hat. Emily thought again that there was something quite delightful about a storm. But when they left the woods, their troubles began. The storm swooped down on them in all its fury. The winter road went through the fields and wound and twisted and doubled in and out around corners and spruce groves. A road that would break a snake's back, as Perry said. The track was already almost obliterated with the drift, and the horses plunged to their knees. They had not gone a mile before Perry whistled in dismay. "We'll never make Blairwater tonight, Ted." "We've got to make somewhere," shouted Ted. "We can't camp here. And there's no house till we get back to the summer road past Shaw's Hill. Duck under the robes, girls. You'd better get back with Ilsa, Emily, and Perry will come up here with me." The transfer was effected. Emily, no longer thinking storms quite so delightful. Perry and Teddy were both thoroughly alarmed. They knew the horses could not go much farther in that depth of snow. "If we can only get to Malcolm Shaw's, we'll be all right," muttered Perry. "We'll never get that far. Shaw's Hill is filled in by this time to the fence tops," said Teddy. "Here's the old John house. Do you suppose we could stay here?" "Cold as a barn," said Perry. "The girls would freeze. We must try to make Malcolm's." When the plunging horses reached the summer road, the boys saw at a glance that Shaw's Hill was a hopeless proposition. All traces of track were obliterated by drifts that were over the fence tops. Telephone posts were blown down across the road, and a huge fallen tree blocked the gap where the field road ran out to it. "Nothing to do but go back to the old John house," said Perry. "We can't go wandering over the fields in the teeth of the storm, looking for a way through to Malcolm's. We'd get stuck and freeze to death." Teddy turned the horses. The snow was thicker than ever. Every minute the drift deepened. The track was entirely gone, and if the old John house had been very far away, they could never have found it. Fortunately, it was near, and after one last wild flounder through the unbroken drift around it, during which the boys had to get out and scramble along on their own feet, they reached the comparative calm of the little cleared space in the young spruce woods, wherein stood the old John house. The old John house had been old when, 40 years ago, John Shaw had moved into it with his young bride. It had been a lonely spot even then, far back from the road, and almost surrounded by spruce woods. John Shaw had lived there 5 years. Then his wife died. He had sold the farm to his brother Malcolm and gone west. Malcolm farmed the land and kept the little barn in good repair, but the house had never been occupied since, save for a few weeks in winter when Malcolm's boys camped there while they got out their firewood. It was not even locked. Tramps and burglars were unknown in Dairy Pond. Our castaways found easy entrance through the door of the tumble-down porch and drew a breath of relief to find themselves out of the shrieking wind and driving snow. "We won't freeze anyhow," said Perry. "Ted and I'll have to see if we can get the horses in the barn, and then we'll come back and see if we can't make ourselves comfortable. I've got matches, and I've never been stumped yet." Perry met no great difficulties in making good his boast. His lighted match revealed a couple of half-burned candles in squat tin candlesticks, a cracked and rusty, but still quite serviceable old Waterloo stove, 3 chairs, a bench, a sofa, and a table. "What's the matter with this?" demanded Perry. "They'll be awfully worried about us at home, that's all," said Emily, shaking the snow off her wraps. "Worry won't kill them in one night," said Perry. "We'll get home tomorrow somehow." "Meanwhile, this is an adventure," laughed Emily. "Let's get all the fun out of it we can." Ilsa said nothing, which was very odd in Ilsa. Emily, looking at her, saw that she was very pale, and recalled that she had been unusually quiet ever since they had left the hall. "Aren't you feeling all right, Ilsa?" she asked anxiously. "I'm feeling all wrong," said Ilsa, with a ghastly smile. I'm sick as a dog," she added, with more force than elegance. "Oh, Ilsa!" "Don't hit the ceiling," said Ilsa impatiently. "I'm not beginning pneumonia or appendicitis. I'm just plain sick. That pie I had at the hall was too rich, I suppose. It turned my little tummy upside down. Ow!" "Lie down on the sofa," urged Emily. "Perhaps you'll feel better then." Ilsa, shuddering and abject, cast herself down. A sick stomach is not a romantic ailment, or a very deadly one, but it certainly takes the ginger out of its victim for the time being. The boys, finding a box full of wood behind the stove, soon had a roaring fire. Perry took one of the candles and explored the little house. In a small room opening off the kitchen was an old-fashioned wooden bedstead with a rope mattress. The other room, it had been Almira Shaw's parlor in olden days, was half filled with oat straw. Upstairs there was nothing but emptiness and dust. But in the little pantry, Perry made some finds. "There's a can of pork and beans here," he announced, "and a tin box half full of crackers. I see our breakfast. I suppose the Shaw boys left them here. And what's this?" Perry brought out a small bottle, uncorked it, and sniffed it solemnly. "Whiskey, as I'm a living sinner. Not much, but enough. Here's your medicine, Ilsa. You'll take it in some hot water, and it'll settle your stomach in a jiffy." "I hate the taste of whiskey," moaned Ilsa. "Father never uses it. He doesn't believe in it." "And Tom does," said Perry, as if that settled the matter. "It's a sure cure. Try it and see." "But there isn't any water," said Ilsa. "You'll have to take it straight then. There's only about 2 tablespoons in the bottle. Try it. It won't kill you if it doesn't cure you." Poor Ilsa was really feeling so abjectly wretched that she would have taken anything short of poison if she thought there was any chance of its helping her. She crawled off the sofa sat down on a chair before the fire, and swallowed the dose. It was good, strong whiskey. Malcolm Shaw could have told you that. And I think there was really more than 2 tablespoonfuls in the bottle, though Perry always insisted that there wasn't. Ilsa sat, huddled in her chair, for a few minutes longer. Then she got up and put her hand uncertainly on Emily's shoulder. "Do you feel worse?" asked Emily anxiously. I'm drunk," said Ilsa. "Help me back to the sofa, for mercy's sake. My legs are going to double up under me. Who was the Scotchman up at Malvern who said he never got drunk, but the whiskey always settled into his knees? But mine's in the head, too. It's spinning round." Perry and Teddy both sprang to help her, and between them, a very wobbly Ilsa made safe port on the sofa again. "Is there anything we can do?" implored Emily. "Too much has already been done," said Ilsa, with preternatural solemnity. She shut her eyes, and not another word would she say in response to any entreaty. Finally, it was deemed best to let her alone. "She'll sleep it off, and anyway, I guess it'll settle her stomach," said Perry. Emily could not take it so philosophically. Not until Ilsa's quiet breathing, half an hour later, proved that she was really asleep, could Emily begin to taste the flavor of their adventure. The wind thrashed about the old house and rattled the windows as if in a fury over their escape from it. It was very pleasant to sit before the stove and listen to the wild melody of the defeated storm. Very pleasant to think about the vanished life of this old dead house, in the years when it had been full of love and laughter. Very pleasant to talk of cabbages and kings with Perry and Teddy, in the faint glow of candlelight. Very pleasant to sit in occasional silences, staring into the firelight, which flickered alluringly over Emily's milk-white brow and haunting shadowy eyes. Once, Emily, glancing up suddenly, found Teddy looking at her strangely. For just a moment, their eyes met and locked. Only a moment. Yet Emily was never really to belong to herself again. She wondered dazedly what had happened. Whence came that wave of unimaginable sweetness that seemed to engulf her, body and spirit? She trembled. She was afraid. It seemed to open such dizzying possibilities of change. The only clear idea that emerged from her confusion of thought was that she wanted to sit with Teddy before a fire like this every night of their lives. And then, a fig for the storms. She dared not look at Teddy again, but she thrilled with the delicious sense of his nearness. She was acutely conscious of his tall, boyish straightness, his glossy black hair, his luminous dark blue eyes. She had always known she liked Teddy better than any other male creature in her ken. But this was something apart from liking altogether, this sense of belonging to him that had come in that significant exchange of glances. All at once, she seemed to know why she had always snubbed any of the high school boys who wanted to be her beau. The delight of the spell that had been suddenly laid on her was so intolerable that she must break it. She sprang up and went to the window. The little hissing whisper of snow against the blue-white frost crystals on the pane seemed softly to scorn her bewilderment. The 3 big haystacks, thatched with snow, dimly visible at the corner of the barn, seemed to be shaking their shoulders with laughter over her predicament. The fire in the stove, reflected out in the clearing, seemed, like a mocking goblin bonfire under the firs. Beyond it, through the woods, were unfathomable spaces of white storm. For a moment, Emily wished she were out in them. There would be freedom there from this fetter of terrible delight that had so suddenly and inexplicably made her a prisoner, her who hated bonds. Am I falling in love with Teddy? She thought. I won't. Perry, quite unconscious of all that had happened in the wink of an eye to Teddy and Emily, yawned and stretched. Guess we'd better hit the hay. The candles are about done. I guess that straw will make a real good bed for us, Ted. Let's carry enough out and pile it on the bedstead in there to make a comfortable roost for the girls. With one of the fur rugs over it, it won't be so bad. We ought to have some high old dreams tonight, Ilsa especially. Wonder if she's sober yet. I've got a pocket full of dreams to sell, said Teddy whimsically, with a new unaccountable gaiety of voice and manner. What d'ye lack? A dream of success, a dream of adventure, a dream of the sea, a dream of the woodland. Any kind of a dream you want at reasonable prices, including one or two unique little nightmares. What will you give me for a dream? Emily turned around, stared at him for a moment, then forgot thrills and pells and everything else in a wild longing for a Jimmy book. As if his question, "What will you give me for a dream?" had been a magic formula opening some sealed chamber in her brain. She saw unrolling before her a dazzling idea for a story, complete even to the title, A Cellar of Dreams. For the rest of that night, Emily thought of nothing else. The boys went off to their straw couch, and Emily, after deciding to leave Ilsa, who seemed comfortable, on the sofa as long as she slept, lay down on the bed in the small room. But not to sleep. She had never felt less like sleeping. She did not want to sleep. She had forgotten that she had been falling in love with Teddy. She had forgotten everything but her wonderful idea. Chapter by chapter, page by page, it unrolled itself before her in the darkness. Her characters lived and laughed and talked and did and enjoyed and suffered. She saw them on the background of the storm. Her cheeks burned, her heart beat. She tingled from head to foot with the keen rapture of creation, a joy that sprang, fountain-like, from the depths of being and seemed independent of all earthly things. Ilsa had got drunk on Malcolm Shaw's forgotten Scotch whiskey, but Emily was intoxicated with immortal wine.